I propose a toast to Shapilov. Drink.
Shapilov!
Drink!
Marry everyone.
That bitch set me up.
I got set up with this lovely 6-pack of IPA, so
Okay.
somebody's got to drink it.
All I see is your control panel, and there we go. Now I'm Cumberland Thruway. Okay.
Husband says, very nice wallpaper there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was very appropriate for this week.
Yes.
Would we like to do introductions?
I would love to do introductions. Let's just give it a minute to see who else joins us here. Before we start.
That's Murphy talking now, by the way. That's the Tappan Zee Bridge guy. Online known as Freeway Wiz.
We'd like to welcome everybody in and welcome you into tonight's presentation featuring Interstate 68 and Corridor E of the Appalachian Development Highway System. Hope you guys are having a good weekend so far. It's great to have you with us. I'm Roadway Wiz, and I'm joined by my esteemed panel tonight. We've got a few folks to introduce you to right now. We've got Steve hanging out in New Jersey.
Woo.
Yeah, you know him. You know his deal by now.
Boo!
Sorry.
Yeah, speaking of boo, we have Doug of Gribble Nation.
Ahoy hoy.
We've got Mike and Laura from Maryland representing MD Roads.
And Laney.
MD Roads!
And I think we have a little rainy too.
And Rainy!
Oh.
She's just an exit ramp right now, but she's growing into a freeway.
Okay.
And we've also got Pat joining us from Maryland too, back again. So it's good to have him with us as well.
Great. An icy, but not entirely iced over Maryland, at least the part of the state where I'm in right now.
Yeah, well, I guess we should give it a couple more days.
It might get worse before it gets better, although they claimed it's supposed to be over freezing tomorrow, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Guys, welcome. Welcome in folks in the live chat who are going to be with us tonight. Yeah, let's get started here. Doug, you're here representing Gribble Nation. Steve, you're here representing Alps Roads. Do you guys have anything you want to plug as far as announcements go?
Yes, I uploaded a new blog post about Lombard Street in San Francisco this morning.
All that.
And I also put in a recent podcast episode about the Massachusetts exit renumbering. Definitely worth a listen. I have a few different blog articles and podcasts down the pike coming very soon.
All right. On my end, I am hopefully by the end of today, I'll have another update to my New Jersey route ends, which should fill out everything pre-1953. There's still plenty more I could do, but I think I'm going to get back to regular updates after that. And there may be a potential upcoming feature partnered with Gribble Nation, so let's see what comes of that. But we're in discussions right now.
Awesome.
It's a secret.
Shh.
I won't tell. Yeah, so Steve went down the wormhole of old alignments and stuff. Is that pretty much what you were doing?
I've been deep into proving and correcting a lot of what was written years ago about New Jersey state highway history, and I feel like I know so much more about my state now. Please ask me anything.
Hey, Steve, I have a question about history.
No,
Do you think?
that was metaphorical.
I understand. Do you think that someone, and it does, and I don't mean you necessarily, but someone should perhaps do almost a freeway gym type videoing of exits 1 to 4 on the turnpike, since it's the last of the original New Jersey Turnpike, or reasonably original, and it's going to look different in the not too distant future.
I believe that. Well, first of all, I'm going to dispute that. But second of all, I will imagine that there are plenty of videos already of that stretch of the turnpike.
Yeah.
My dispute is that the Newark Bay extension was designed to the same original standards, and the eastern part of that has not changed since its inception, as well as the Pennsylvania extension approach to the Delaware River Bridge.
Okay.
So you still have a couple original segments left. Now, if they do replace the Delaware Bridge, which I know they're talking about now, that would wipe that out. But while they've been rehabbing the viaducts on 78, I know of no plans to widen them.
Okay.
Or at least anything I know beyond what I've just told you, I cannot say.
That's okay.
But I don't.
It's okay.
So before I tell you about my upload update, I will remind you folks politely that tonight's presentation is being brought to you by the letter E and the number 68, as you see on the screen here. As far as YouTube is concerned, we continue with Vermont uploads. We completed every mile of interstate in Vermont this past week, which means that all of the New England states plus New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and D.C., as far as the northeastern states and regions are concerned, are 100% covered on the channel or the family of networks. So you can check out any footage that you might have missed over the years. You know, it's all there for you, including the turnpike from exits 1 to 4. Don't forget about that. That's been up there for ages. So there's that. We'll continue with some more Vermont stuff for the next couple of weeks, and then we'll transition into finishing up some odds and ends in states such as Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia before we move on to something else in April. As far as other things are concerned, as you may be already aware, I do in fact have a new car that is known as Wizmobile 3. The 2020 Subaru Impreza made its debut. It made an appearance on last week's live presentation. So that's the new ride that I'm going to have, hopefully for the next several years, and hopefully it brings me to a lot of great places, and I can make a lot of great new memories with it.
Would you say nobody beats the Wizmobile?
I've been saying that for years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nobody beats the Wizmobile. Nobody's going to beat the Wizmobile.
Before we go any further, I suppose we should do a quick recap of the big game. I know this is something that I was dreading going in, but there was a big game last Sunday, and we do need to talk about it real quick. I'm just going to put this up on the screen here and let you guys react to that when it comes up on your screens. I know you guys have a lot to say about this particular result, but if anybody wants to get something off their chest, go right ahead.
I think the Kitten halftime show is superior.
I think that we should be talking about the big games next week, and the NHL is going to have outdoor games at Lake Tahoe.
Ooh. On the water?
I wish. No, they're building a makeshift rink and a golf course that overlooks the water in the mountains.
Are there going to be
at the
involved?
Edgewood Tahoe Resort in State Line, Nevada?
Now,
it's going to be Colorado and Vegas in one game, and then Boston and Philly in the other game.
Now, will there be puppies involved?
The Avalanche have the mascot for the Colorado Avalanche is a Saint Bernard.
Okay. Yeah, so anyway, Team Rough prevailed over Team Fluff the other day. I believe they scored a touchdown in the final seconds. It was a thrilling conclusion to the game. And Team Rough is the Puppy Bowl 17 champions. So congratulations to them.
Woo! Go Rough! Yay!
Go Fluff!
Boo!
Well, they actually
I'm a Kittens fan.
filmed the Puppy Bowl at the Cool Assuring Arena in Glens Falls, New York. They had to move it from the usual filming location, Manhattan.
Yeah, they usually film it in the city, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But indoor dining was not open, so they could not have pets dining inside.
Yeah, so they went up to Glens Falls, which is where the state basketball tournament is usually held for the high schools.
Oh, okay. Interstate 68 is, as you can see on the map here, it runs east to west across West Virginia and Maryland. It's about 113 miles long between Morgantown and Hancock. And tonight's video, which lasts just about exactly 90 minutes, will take us on an eastbound ride along the entirety of the freeway, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss along the way, from one end to the other. I remind you that next Saturday's presentation involves a return to the webinar format for the state of West Virginia. We talked at length about the city of Charleston last week. Next Saturday the 20th, we'll be talking about the rest of the state. And we're even going to get to talk about I-73 in West Virginia, so that's going to be fun. You're going to want.
There is no future of I-73 in West Virginia.
Capiche? See that? Look, there's an I-73 shield and there's a US 121 shield on that. Boy, that's gonna stir up some discussion, I'm sure.
121 at least is planned as happening.
Part of it exists, sort of, as a state highway.
More so than 73.
Yeah. And of course, tomorrow we have the third and final part of our Bridges of the Delaware River webinar series, where we'll cover the bridges in the Philadelphia metro area right on down through the Cape May Lighthouse. So, hope you can join us for that tomorrow. That's going to be
the proposed southern crossing of I-87.
Ooh, maybe that's in there. I don't know. We'll have to see what's in the PowerPoint.
All right.
I'd be for that.
Does anybody have any questions before we get started?
There's a question from Brian Powell that says I-73 isn't happening. So I just wanted to reinforce that 73 isn't happening.
I think it's happening in Virginia either.
No, only in North Carolina, which would designate an interstate on someone's driveway.
Is that Adam Prince's driveway?
Everyone's driveway.
Oh.
Including Adam's.
All right, folks, here we go. So it's 90 minutes and 113 miles, this video. So your trip on I-68 gets started right now. I lied. We're actually on I-79 northbound, approaching the split for 68 in Morgantown. So, as I mentioned at the top here, 68 is 113 miles. It was fully completed and signed as an interstate in 1991. For its entire length, it is also an overlap with ADHS Corridor E, which we'll talk about more in the minutes to come. The one thing I did want to mention before I completely forget about this is, at least in the last several years, there have been, as we merge onto 68 eastbound here in the video, there has been chatter, I don't know how serious it is, about a possible extension or continuation of the freeway west of Morgantown towards the Ohio River. Seems like a long shot. I don't think there's anything imminent that's going to come of that, but it is out there. as a potential long-range possibility?
West Virginia is not a state that I would ever say something cannot be done, given the way they tear apart mountainsides. If they have an interest in that connection, they'll make it happen, but the question is where it ultimately would go. And I've heard a few different possibilities, mainly Parkersburg and New Martinsville, but I've also heard it bending north towards Moundsville and Wheeling.
Yeah.
Wheeling is what I've heard from time to time, but no, I've never seen anything official from West Virginia DOT that would back any of that up. So I think it's mostly, almost fictional highways talking.
Yeah. Well, I guess they have the Wheeling feeling.
My understanding is a lot of the talk has been political, as in, as in a political leader saying like, oh yeah, this is something we want to prioritize, but it not getting beyond that.
Yeah. I remember a number of years ago, this is 2004, I was driving from Moundsville, basically from Moundsville to Morgantown, and I know basically when you get closer to Moundsville on 250, that road felt a little rough at the time. That might have changed, since 2004. I haven't really have driven that stretch since then. But while we're in Morgantown, just something that worth bringing up. It is the home of West Virginia University, yep. And there's also a people mover that goes around Morgantown. It's called the Morgantown Personal Rapid Transit.
Yep.
And it basically connects the campuses of West Virginia University and the city's downtown area.
And just an aside, Doug, if you have Gribble Nation articles that you want to post as we go, I don't know if we've ever done articles on stuff along this corridor, but if we have, feel free to post it in the live chat for folks.
More so on the articles that I know Adam has done on the National Road.
Okay.
Which, we'll be getting to more so, when we get into Maryland.
Yep. Yeah, so let's talk about ADHS Corridor E and what that is and how it became I-68. Because originally when this whole highway was planned out, the interstate system was not part of the package. It received the US 48 designation, which now, of course, applies to Corridor H further south. But it was originally intended to just serve a regional function as a U.S. highway, not as a full-fledged interstate. Who wants to take a turn discussing that history?
Sure, I'll jump in. So basically, the long story short is that the I-68 number was originally planned for the US 50 upgrade between I-45, the Capital Beltway, and Annapolis, which was approved in the mid-1980s, and that was constructed in the 1990s. And US 48 was going to stay US 48 until 1989, and that's when AASHTO approved it to be I-68. And part of that was because because they ultimately decided not to sign the US 50 upgrade with any number. It's currently secret I-595, and the idea was, there'd be too many shields, and they didn't want to go Southern style and have a bajillion multiplexes on that highway. They're like, people know US 50 because it goes all the way to Ocean City. We don't want to mess with that. So that freed up the I-68 number, and so when the road was completed, that's when it was given the I-68 number on August 2nd, 1991.
Yeah, this road really serves a couple of purposes. It serves to connect the communities of interior Maryland and northern West Virginia in Appalachia. It also serves as a pretty handy alternate route to I-70 across southwest Pennsylvania.
It's the Pennsylvania Shunpike.
Well, you could call this road that too. Yeah.
That's exactly. So it's very much endorsed in Maryland. Like, to go further west, take I-68 to I-79. And as far as distance, just take I-70 between Hancock, Maryland, and Washington, PA is 150 miles. But to take I-68 to I-79 is a little bit longer at 163 miles. But time-wise, they come out to be about the same, about 2.5 hours.
Plus, you don't have to dole out any cash money.
Right.
No, that's true, yeah.
The free aspect is huge. And even though there are even though some of the grades are a little steeper on 68, there's still, some pretty windy parts and pretty, intense parts of the Pennsylvania Turnpike as well.
Yeah. So, we'll be crossing over Cheat Lake soon, which is basically, used to be called Lake Lynn. It's a reservoir that's on the Cheat River. And it was dammed, looks like back in 1925.
I would comment as we get towards it, you've been seeing signs for 857 in the circle, meaning it's a secondary route. One of the interesting phenomena here is 857, now a little less so with the building of 43, the Montfayette, which we can all talk about next, but 857 was a major route out of Morgantown towards the east, along with 119. It may even still be, but I imagine then it was probably the most used secondary route in West Virginia. It wasn't a fractional route. As far as I know, there's no other 857, and yet it has never been a primary route. And it was one of those, it seemed like an oversight. And now that you've got the Monfay and that's a primary route, maybe it's a little more justified that 857 is a secondary.
Right. Well, I know that at one point, the Monfay, basically, at one point, Pennsylvania actually wanted to renumber, the part of the Montfayette Expressway south of the Uniontown as 119. West Virginia preferred keeping it as it is, though.
The other thing that's interesting, we see this curve coming up here. If you're coming in the opposite direction, westbound, we'll see something similar to this again in Maryland and Cumberland, Maryland, but it's a long and pretty tough descent coming down off the mountain. And, of course, at the bottom of the descent is this fairly sharp curve, and there have been, on occasion, some pretty bad crashes. And I know at least one of the ramps in the interchange coming up here at Route 43/857 is actually signed that trucks with failed brakes should not take that ramp, because if they do, there's apparently a 100% probability that a crash will result at the bottom of the ramp. So, and you might see as we continue west at the top of this grade, there's a mandatory West Virginia truck stop, and I don't mean as in pilot or the other commercial truck stops, but a place where trucks have to stop and supposedly check their brakes and so forth before continuing down this grade.
Yeah, this is quite a steep grade. It's like 6 or 7%, I want to say, and this is the Cheat River Canyon that we're climbing out of right now.
Brian calls it right. The mandatory stop came in about 2000. That's right. It's up at Cooper's Rock. That's exactly right. Thank you, Brian.
And speaking of Cooper's Rock, it is a state forest. There's actually a few different overlooks that are worth seeing. That's actually on my to hike list at some point. Is actually explore some of the the overlooks around the Cheat River Canyon.
Yeah, the Cheat River is known for being one of the tougher whitewater rafting experiences in West Virginia, and apparently it's not a place you should necessarily go unless you are pretty experienced at doing whitewater rafting in pretty difficult waters. There have been fatalities
throw up
there.
a link to the Cooper's Rock State Forest website, so
Yeah.
People could read up about its history and things you could do there.
The lake area is one of the more popular recreational parts of West Virginia, I'm sure, because it's relatively accessible from Pittsburgh, whereas most of the state is pretty difficult to get anywhere.
Well, we have a minute. Did we want to elaborate some on the Montfayette Expressway?
Before we do that, husband wants to add something.
Hi, husband.
Hey.
Hey.
Everybody's doing well.
Hi, husband.
Mentioning the secondary 857, that's very much usually out of kilter with West Virginia's numbering system. The 800 series is usually reserved for access to state parks, and on some of the grid maps you'll see that occasionally it's shielded. It's a hexagon shield, and usually you don't see them unless except on references. And then also in that same vein is the in the 900 series of the home access routes, which it entails houses access to roads built after West Virginia took over the system. So ways to get those new roads into the system. You'll see them sometimes on the blade signs as well. Thank you.
This public service announcement.
As far as the Montfayette, I guess the big thing is it was built. It's an economic development effort that was built well, there were a couple pieces that were not, but almost all of it was built as an extension that does not connect to the mainline Pennsylvania Turnpike, but is nonetheless owned and maintained by the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission down to the Pennsylvania-West Virginia state border.
Yeah.
And it's still not complete. There are pieces north of I-70 getting into close to the downtown area of Pittsburgh remains unbuilt, but I believe it is in either preliminary or maybe final engineering. That's what I've heard.
I think they have settled on the alignment. I may be in final at this point.
Yeah.
I can go for that.
Just the piece that takes it over to Monroeville. The rest of that other fork in the road that would have taken it west towards town is off the books.
I read that. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's still not going to connect directly to the Turnpike main line.
No, I think if we go and get to 376, and that would be it.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so of course the most useful piece of that whole thing is not going to get built, but
right.
That's it. Hey, that's how it works these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
You will see this a lot along this stretch of highway. Take in the sight of a runaway truck ramp on your right.
Yep.
Well, you see this a lot in these states anyway, but...
runaway truck going up a ramp.
So that's the story with that. 68 spends about 31 miles or so in the state of West Virginia. It spends the other 80 or so in Maryland.
That's right.
81.09 miles in Maryland.
Okay. Where does this rank for you guys as far as your favorite drives in the East? I know that it seems to make a lot of people's lists.
Very scenic road.
The scenic road for the interstate system, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very scenic. Probably not the most scenic freeway in the East to me. Actually, to me, if you're looking at scenic freeways, the first thing I think of is US 15 north of Williamsport, PA, followed by the Northway through the Adirondacks.
Northway's nice.
But this is definitely scenic. It's a road I don't take often enough, but it is, and when I do get to take it, I do enjoy driving it.
I-64 between I-81 and I-77 at Beckley, pretty high in terms of mountain. Mountain.
I need to finish that section.
Yeah.
Hopefully later this year.
I'm going to differ from most of the crowd here, and I know I'll be booed at the end of this. Please withhold your boos, but I don't really rank 68 on my top freeways. For one, I'm frequently using it either early in the morning or late at night to get to or from home to places I haven't been. And I've been along the 68 corridor plenty of times. It's generally walled in by trees. There are not a lot of views. Even Sideling Hill is just generally, you're up high, but you see a bunch of trees and stuff. It's not as scenic, whereas I myself prefer roads like I-91 where you get views of the Connecticut River every so often, or the Northway. There's a couple of nice scenic views there. So feel free to boo me, but 68 to me is nice, but it's nothing special.
I'll withhold my boos. It's an opinion worth discussing.
The Maryland crowd hasn't had much to say as far as defending that.
What do you think? What do you think, husband?
I think I think it's fair that it's high up on my list, just being from Maryland, but also being not having a lot of views. There's a lot of things in the East. In the East in general, everything is pretty much tree lined, so you're kind of limited in that way.
I'm going to say, so for me, I-68 is high up on my list, but a lot of that comes from nostalgia of just being amazed the very first time that I saw the Sideling Hill cut. And so for me, symbolically, that's like the gateway to the West. So when I and obviously we'll see that towards the end of this video, but obviously coming from Maryland and going westward, that's the first part that I see. And so for me, there's some nostalgia. Also, a family trip to Deep Creek Lake that we took when I was young, that I find it very scenic. I appreciate the different views, the different mountains and things that we go over. So yeah, I would say it's definitely high up on at least my Maryland list. I haven't really given it a serious thought as to whether or not it's my top, in the East or in the region.
Brewston Mills is coming up, and you don't really see anything of it from the freeway, but I think it's there in part because of the presence of I-68 is a large federal prison complex, which is on the north side of the freeway, but still in West Virginia.
Hazleton, I believe?
Yeah, I think that's what it's called, USP Hazleton, and I just point that out. But you really, at night, when it's all lit up, with all the, lighting to discourage escapes, I think you can occasionally see it from I-68, but in the daytime, it's not really visible from there.
Yeah, this is the last real town of significance in West Virginia that we'll reach.
Yep.
And then things will pick up after about a half hour or so as we get near Frostburg and then on to Cumberland, which is the control city now for eastbounders.
This is one of the narrowest unguarded medians you'll find on a roadway with a speed limit of 70.
Good point.
Yeah.
And it's very dark at night here. No highway lighting. There's no town, so it's rather surprising.
Yeah, no, that's right. And it is the one place where I've actually had a pretty bad crash with a deer. It was in the Maryland part of I-68, near the small town of Flintstone. Fred Flintstone does not live there, but I was actually looking out for them because it's notorious for deer, and the damn deer came at me. I was driving in this direction eastbound, and the deer came leaping across the Jersey barrier and had a close encounter of a lethal kind with the Jeep Cherokee Grand Cherokee that I was driving. The Cherokee wasn't badly injured, but it was still over $1,000 to get it repaired, and the deer did not survive. And yes, it's dark, and I think a lot of I-68, I looked at it after that happened, and a fair amount of it does not appear to be fenced, or if it's fenced, it's not visible from travel lanes.
Brian notes that West Virginia is planning to add cable median guide rail throughout the system. Not this section. This section it's wider apart, but certainly back there where it was narrow, that makes sense. New Jersey doesn't do cable guide rails, so about 10 years ago or so, they went through highways like Route 24 and put double-faced steel guide rail throughout the median and basically ruined the appearance of multiple highways in doing so. So I can appreciate that cable guide rail is the one considered here, as it's much less visually intrusive.
Yeah, they were doing that, West Virginia was, on 64 east of Beckley when I was through there last summer. So yeah, it does look like they are moving through the system to close up any remaining, lack of median protection. I know that was a big stink, for example, in places like Long Island, New York, a few years back. It's just no longer hip to not have any kind of barrier in the median of, interstates of any kind. So it is good to see that they're starting to finally get around to addressing all that stuff.
What you see here, once you're about 60 feet apart, there really is no benefit to installing it. So here they may not.
It's just like the spot that we saw a couple miles back. Yeah, that's a little too close for there to not be anything, right?
Laura, go ahead.
Yes. I don't want to change the subject, but I did want to bring up before we leave West Virginia. I didn't want to say anything earlier, but because I didn't want to, get my words mixed up or twisted regarding the extension to I-68. But yes, there's been talks since the 1990s, and in 2003, the Federal Highway Administration approved the extension, which paves the way for federal funding and for the road to become part of the national highway system. But since there's no funding, it hasn't gone. It hasn't obviously progressed on a federal level. Things basically kind of fell, to the wayside for a while. And then in 2014, Marshall County officials brought it up again, basically as a way for oil companies to have easier access to drill in the area, likely with fracking. And so the idea is that if an extension was built, it would include a widening of West Virginia 2 to 4 lanes and cost an estimated $5 million per mile. West Virginia ended up approving a bond measure. I can't figure out what year based off of quick research, but the bond itself is called Roads to Prosperity. Woo. And roads. Sorry, I have a bunch of the 1.6 billion Roads to Prosperity bond. And so there's been talk about using funding from that towards an upgraded West Virginia Route 2. So the project is called Route to I-68. The website is route to I68.com. The likelihood that would actually be, a road that's up to Interstate 68 standards seems like a very big long shot. It seems more likely that it would be just improvements to West Virginia 2 and an upgraded West Virginia 2. But I just want to throw out there that it is a little more than a long shot issue, and that it seems like there's been actual stuff going on in regards to it over the past couple decades.
Yeah, and spot improvements to US 250, right?
Yes.
I would imagine that's the corridor that would roughly follow to get you over to the Ohio River.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's talk of that too, about upgrades along US 250.
Yeah. People seem to think in West Virginia that the solution to every single problem is to build a 4-lane highway. We kind of talked about this with Corridor H a couple weeks ago, but, you can't exactly build 4-lane highways out of your problems. And so...
No, it's
you can
true.
build them, but...
You can build them, but it doesn't solve anything necessarily. But, hey, we're
in Maryland.
We're leaving West Virginia behind. Welcome to Maryland, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep.
All right.
Woo! All right. We can stop talking about bulldozing mountains.
Well, for the time being.
For the time
So what do we want to say introductory-wise about Maryland and I-68 and the National Road?
Okay, so this is not the first numbered highway in Maryland, or where I-68 is. This used to be I-48, or an earlier rendition of US 48 rather. When they built the freeway, and before that, there was also US 40, which at one point was the National Road, which was actually one of the first main roads for settlers out west of the 19th century. Went from Maryland through southwestern PA, the northern panhandle of West Virginia, and through Ohio, Indiana, and wound up near Vandalia, Illinois.
Yes,
we have
and you know
a page
what's
on Cumberland Nation that has information on the National Road, and I will post that link now.
Awesome. I just wanted to add that prior to the National Road, prior to the National Road, there was a colonial era road, but even prior to that was a Native American trail called Nema Collins Trail.
Yep.
And so that was the original trail through. And then around the time of the French and Indian War was when the colonial era Braddock Road was built. And a lot of that was, obviously for wartime. It was named after, the general. And from there is when the National Road kind of came into being. It was, almost like the third generation of, obviously the first modern and first federally funded road in the U.S., but it wasn't entirely a new path.
And the US 40 designation came about when? Like right around when the US highway system was drawn up, more or less?
Yes. So it became US 40 in 1926 as part of the original US highway system.
So, friends, we're passing by Friendsville.
Yep.
Woo!
Which was apparently founded by John Friend.
Thank you for being a friend.
That's Pennsylvania. Or James Taylor.
One other thing for the geography geeks out there, and I know there are some, this is the only part of Maryland that does not drain into either the Atlantic Ocean or Chesapeake Bay. We are actually still here in the watershed of the Ohio and then ultimately the Mississippi River. So the rivers and creeks here ultimately drain all the way to New Orleans, which when I mention that to some people, they either deny it or you get into disagreements.
It's fake news.
It's fake. There you go. That's good. That's good. So
yeah, I know that the river that goes through Friendsville's I want to say it's the Youghiogheny River.
Youghiogheny, that's correct.
They call it the Yaak River, I believe, is
that's
the name for it. And that goes, basically into the Mon, which goes into Pittsburgh.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, speaking of, of this part of the state, as we were talking about the National Road, what I should have, mentioned, and Doug mentioned about how it, goes up into southwestern Pennsylvania, is that this part of I-68 from in Maryland, up until we get to exit 14 was all new construction, because the National Road goes north at that point into Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Yeah, it goes up to Uniontown, doesn't it? In Pennsylvania?
That's right. That's 40. US 40 goes to Uniontown. Indeed it does.
Yeah, okay.
One other thing in terms of old transportation infrastructure, and also we talked about things that never happened. There were plans that the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal, which never made it west of Cumberland, but it was planned originally to come across the Eastern Continental Divide here in Garrett County and cross what is now one of the places potentially where it would have crossed what is now I-68. Of course, that wasn't there when they were talking about building the canal this far west. It would have crossed somewhere in the vicinity of Grantsville, which is also home to the very nice historic National Road Bridge over the Castleman River. So the C&O Canal kind of would have followed, by one plan, it would have followed the Castleman River on the Mississippi River side of the Eastern Continental Divide. But of course, it never happened. It only ever went to Cumberland. I think one of the things that might have overwhelmed them is the amount of elevation gain from Cumberland up to the top of the Eastern Continental Divide is absolutely immense. And I don't know that the engineering technologies that might have that would have been used would have been able to handle that much gain and keep water in the canal, which might also have been a challenge as you got up to the really high elevations.
I'm not sure we have that technology today.
Well, you may be right about that. I mean, I think, yeah, that's a good point. But anyway, it never happened. Never got beyond Cumberland, and so that's. You can, by the way, if you are so inclined, you can walk or ride a bike along the old C&O Canal all the way from Cumberland into the Georgetown area of Washington, D.C., for those that are
all right.
So. One of the things that Brian mentions here in the chat that we should have mentioned it before we got to the state line, but I will sing the praises for those who haven't been this way. The West Virginia Welcome Center entering West Virginia from Maryland on I-68 is very nice. It's one of the nicest, I think, state welcome centers to be found anywhere. It's not perhaps especially elaborate, but I think it's a particularly nice one myself. So if you're that way, you can stop there and get a very nice West Virginia DOT map if you're going that way.
Does Friendsville help? Sorry, I'll hold.
Yeah. As far as the ADHS system is concerned, was there any specific discussion as far as, or any kind of account that you guys could find as far as how this particular corridor came to be in the first place?
Yes. I guess I'll add a brief bit about how the ADA system even came about, and then throw in about Corridor E. But long story short, it all kind of began when President Kennedy was campaigning, and he was moved by the widespread poverty that was in West Virginia, because at the time, 1/3 to 1/2 of all West Virginians lived below the poverty line. And so that was something that he wanted to fix during his presidency. So he created the President's Appalachian Regional Commission in 1963. And then after he was assassinated, Johnson kind of continued that. They prepared a report in 1964 that stated that a modern highway system was needed for economic development, especially since the interstate highway system had bypassed the rugged terrain of Appalachia. So from there, President Johnson requested special aid to Appalachia as part of the War on Poverty. The Appalachian Regional Development Act got passed in 1965 with the intent of building 3,025 miles of road network. Sorry about Rainey crying in the background. She's got a lot to say. Sorry, dear. Anyway, why don't you take her upstairs, honey, for a moment? Mike, can you take her upstairs for a moment?
I'm gonna slip in here to note that the poverty rate is down under 20% now.
Yes. I actually found some different studies about that. But how so basically after the act was passed, how Corridor E kind of came into being is that in Maryland specifically, at the time, there was no good connection to Garrett and Allegheny counties. And, obviously the National Road on US 40 was there, but you had a lot of, large switchbacks. You had some, narrow two-lane roads. So the idea was, if we build, Corridor E through there, it'll boost, economic activity. It'll connect this, part of the state with the rest of Maryland, and also, connect through to West Virginia.
Yeah, and I see that we're approaching a US 219 here. So US 219, if you go south, will take you to Deep Creek Lake, which is a popular recreation area in western Maryland. And it'll take you eventually near Swallow Falls State Park, which is one of the higher waterfalls in Maryland.
We know Doug loves his waterfalls.
Yeah, TLC's been yelling at me for that recently. But you know what? They're just going to have to shove it.
You're not going to stick to the lakes and rivers that you're used to.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, we know the deal.
We know the deal.
I don't want us to forget about Negro Mountain. I know that's coming up at some point around here. So Laura, if you want to like interrupt us and like tell us to shut up so you can talk about that, that's perfectly fine. Because I know you have a lot that you want to say about that. But
I do. I know. So I have a lot to say. I hope I'm not saying too much. I obviously, being Mrs. Maryland Roads, this road is, kind of one of my specialties, and also, the fact that this is, I think, the first webinar you've done, featuring a Maryland road. I'm just super excited. But anyway, Negro Mountain.
Is it really? I don't even remember. Have we done?
Yeah, I'm not even sure.
I don't. Well, we definitely haven't done an actual webinar before, but virtual tours.
Live drive.
You know what? I think she's right. We haven't done a Maryland episode before. So.
We haven't. That's the word I was looking for, episode. But no, we haven't done a webinar. We haven't done a virtual tour. I think this is the first one.
Yeah, so I think we just passed a sign that said Negro Mountain.
Oh, that's interesting because those signs were removed. And hello. There it is. Is this video from prior to 2019?
This may have been filmed in 2018.
That will do it because those signs were removed in April 2019.
Yeah, so Laura, the floor is yours. Tell
floor
us about Negro Mountain.
Sure. So Negro Mountain has a lot of controversy because of its name. Basically, there's multiple legends behind the name, which I'll tell. But as I just mentioned, especially with racial justice issues really coming to light in this past year, and to the signs on I-68 and US 40 Alt were removed. But to provide some history, the first time that the name was officially documented was by the U.S. Geological Service in 1841. It was there's multiple legends behind the name. The most documented legend is from the French Indian War in 1756 that Colonel Thomas Cresap led a force, to fight the war, and that they were attacked, and that a member, a free black man who was known as Nemesis, but also documented as being named Goliath, was killed, and that the mountain was named in his honor. There's other versions of the story that Captain Andrew Friend was on a hunting trip, similar deal. They got attacked by Native Americans. His servant, defended him, and he was mortally wounded and died the next day. John Hyatt was another early settler that traveled to the area, was attacked by natives, and that his slave was fired upon, and that Hyatt tried to save him by sheltering him, and his slave threw it off, saying, "Save yourselves and never mind me. I shall die soon." So what's interesting about all three of these accounts is that all three of the main people actually are all they all knew each other and related to each other. So Cresap and Friend were part of the same militia, and Hyatt is actually Friend's son-in-law. But the most documented of these legends is the Cresap one. There was a report in the Maryland Gazette about the attack on June 10th, 1756, that mentioned that a black man passed away. And then in Ben Franklin's Pennsylvania Gazette, a week later, on the 17th, it was, the story was mentioned. So anyway, I even feel uncomfortable saying the name Negro Mountain out loud, because in the year 2021, that's not the term we used to call black people are African Americans in this country. And so several times since September 1994, actually, there have been various parties proposing name change proposals. The first one was by a history buff and retired steelworker. He was the late Wes Slusher from McKennisport, Pennsylvania, which is near Pittsburgh. He put in a name change proposal to the U.S. Board of Geographic Names to rename it Black Hero Mountain to honor Nemesis and 13 African American Medal of Honor recipients in Pennsylvania and Delaware. That was denied. In Pennsylvania, State Representative Rosita Youngblood from the Philly area, who's African American, put in House resolutions to study renaming in 2007, 2009, and 2015, and none of those came to vote. She also wanted Mount Davis, which is Pennsylvania's highest point and part of Negro Mountain, that name to also be studied because it honors the white settler who once owned the land rather than the colonial African American who owned the land. In Maryland, going back to Maryland in 2011, 9 Maryland senators introduced a bill to rename Negro and Polish mountains. That was voted down in committee, including by all 4 Western Maryland reps. Fast forward to this past year, in February 2020, State Delegate Nick Mosby, who's African American, of representing Baltimore City. He actually is now the City Council President of Baltimore City. He's no longer a delegate, but he put in a resolution to study the history and to rename it to Nemesis Mountain if the history was true, which I find interesting. That resolution was not passed due to the shortened General Assembly session because of the pandemic. What I find interesting about him, wanting to rename it to Nemesis Mountain if it's true, is that may actually shoot it in the foot, because this is actually based off of legends. And so some research in the past year has brought up that the stories that, that the stories behind the name are inaccurate, and that there's no proof in the Maryland State Archives. The original name was Little Laurel Hill of the mountain. But as far as more, African and African American perspectives, the Dr. James Saku, who is the African American Studies Coordinator at Frostburg State University, his view is that if a name is offensive to people, remove it. And that they should name it after the person, not the race. Meanwhile, the Ronald Saunders, who's the president of the Pittsburgh Black Historic Group, known as the Dr. Edna B. Mackenzie chapter of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, his feeling is that there would be no decent substitute, and that it's a very important part of African American history, and that there's nothing offensive about the name. So right there, you've got different Black perspectives on what should be done about the should or shouldn't be done about the name. The Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources simply calls it the Mount Davis Division as part of the Forbes State Forest, which erases the name completely. I don't believe that's the answer either. If anything, I think that's the worst answer, to completely erase the history. There's been 2 other proposals to the U.S. Board of Geographic Names this past year. One for Mount Nemesis and another by a woman in Bethlehem, and one for Malcolm Mountain for Malcolm X. That's from an Ohio man. So there's a lot of controversy about what to do about the name, and I'm not an expert on obviously as a middle class white woman. It doesn't have the same, effect on me as if I were a Black African American in this country. I really think, though, it needs to honor the person, or it needs to honor the African American history in some way. I personally would not mind the name change, but I think it still needs to honor that history. It can't just be changed to something generic.
I think you would agree with me on this, Laura, that we should be listening to the people affected by this entirely, go with their judgment on this, and not try to dictate to them.
I 100% agree.
Yeah, I mean, this is Black History Month, as we know. It's February. And of course, who better to comment on this than a room full of middle-class white people? But,
Yeah.
you know, but there are relevant conversations that people like us can have, you know, in this context as well. As we drive through an oncoming rainstorm here for a few minutes. You know, the whole renaming thing has gotten really murky in general in our society. You know, there's always this knee-jerk reaction about, oh, we must, you know, rename this and we must redo this, and, you know, this is offensive and that's offensive and all that. You gotta be careful with that, though, because if we erase things from the record, that prevents future generations from ever learning about it in the first place. And even our greatest mistakes as a country are teachable moments. And I just feel like there's this sentiment in this country where a certain group of the population wants to erase our mistakes from the record. And all that really does, as I see it, is it breeds more mistakes to be made in the future. And I really think that our darkest moments are our most teachable moments nowadays. And yeah, if a name is offensive, then let's figure out a solution. Let's not automatically hit the cancel button on everybody who disagrees with that. You know, I call me old-fashioned, but I think there's got to be a solution that, you know, meets everybody in the middle here.
I mean, I mean, the interesting thing about the irony of all this is that because of its name, people know about it and have read about it and have learned its history in a way that if it didn't have a controversial name, they wouldn't. It's just ironic.
Yeah, the other thing
I mean,
like
because
to mention,
how many people know about Martin Mountain or Polish Mountain or any of the other mountains that we're gonna cross? I mean, you know, it hasn't those haven't, you know, attracted the same attention statewide or regionally.
Yeah, I do find it interesting that, you know, you have a wide perspective or a wide, you know, range of opinions on the name, you know, within the African American community. And it's not all that, you know, unlike what you see with the Washington Redskins name. There's a wide percentage of the Native American population that has no issue with that either. Yeah, I just find it interesting. I find it interesting that everybody's in such a hurry to cancel things, when instead we should be looking to come together and hear opinions. You know, we hear about certain political parties being the parties of inclusiveness and all that stuff, yet they're also the same people who are looking to cancel things left and right. So, you know, what do you make of that exactly? I don't know.
I think the big challenge is that, you know, that especially, I mean, unfortunately, in these cases of it going through legislators, you know, with Pennsylvania Representative Youngblood, she's from Philly, you know, and former state delegate Nick Mosby being from Baltimore City, that unfortunately that because because people that live several hours away are the ones that are proposing the name change, it's not going to go anywhere. It's, you know, it's laughed out of the room by the Western Maryland folks and the people that live in this side of the world. You know, like, oh, what do you know about a mountain that's 3 hours away from you?
Yeah. And it's all the people at their keyboards on Twitter too, right?
I like the solution that the NCAA has done with teams, which is for the myriad of, and generally Native American named teams, they said if the tribe you're named after or the tribes that are local support your name being what it is, that's fine. You can keep it. Just let us know. And it really should be up to the affected people in the end. And too much of the people who are derisively referred to as woke are the people who think that the most liberal answer is automatically the best answer, and that is the cancel culture you refer to.
Anybody else want to chime in?
I am going to refrain from chiming in.
All right, back from politics to roads.
Yeah.
Well, I
there's a lot of things that
I'm sorry, Doug,
we actually passed through while we were having this discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to say before we wrap up real quick that that is our weekly commentary on Black History Month. I hope we haven't offended too many people, but anyway. No, it's
yes,
interesting.
and again, I want to throw on the record that I'm in that, as I said before with Steve, I'm in support of letting the people who are affected make the call, and that if it were up to me, I would be happy to change the name to something else that honors African American history.
I mean, I'll be honest. I don't mind the whole Nemesis Mountain idea. That sounds pretty cool.
I agree. I love the idea of Nemesis Mountain.
If you can figure out some way that, maintains the story of the individual while, keeping it relevant, I have no issue with listening to that. I just think it's, there are so many knee-jerk reactions that happen nowadays. And we see that in all walks of life. And I just think we need to get away from that and get back to the old-fashioned way of doing things, which is dialogue. But we'll leave it at that. I know that Doug wants to talk about roads, so we'll get back into.
Yeah, I do feel bad being that guy.
No, Doug, why don't you help us catch up on what we missed the last 20 miles?
Yeah, I know there was a discussion in the chat. Basically, we had passed the Eastern Continental Divide. Actually, a ways back, it was around. It's a good question. I want to say it was after the northern exit for 219. And it was basically the Eastern Continental Divide. I think it was also mentioned in chat that it follows the alternate 40 for a while as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we passed Frostburg a few miles back, and we're a few miles before reaching Cumberland.
Yeah. Frostburg has Frostburg State University. Which is a Maryland State University, and it also has basically part of the Great Allegheny Passage Trail, which I believe is about 150 miles, goes through Maryland and Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I want to say it follows an old rail line.
What do we want to say about Cumberland before we reach it?
The roads are very narrow.
I was going to wait until we reached it so that we'd have a visual reference.
Yeah,
well, we can talk about the city of Cumberland as a whole. Right?
Like Cumberland, it was basically where the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal, wound up ending, I believe. It was one point. It was one of George Washington's many headquarters. And another thing about Cumberland is basically, I believe it was named one of Maryland's, or basically one of the country's more scenic or best small towns at one time. I believe the downtown of Cumberland is pretty neat to check out. I also wanted to throw one thing back about Frostburg. I believe it used to be the training camp home of what we now call the Washington football team. years back.
Okay. Cumberland, as far as the city population is concerned, I've only got an estimate from 2019, but it's about 20,000. The city's motto is "Come for a visit, stay for life." It's another one of those cities whose nickname is the Queen City. There's like 17 million Queen cities in the United States, but Cumberland is one of them. It's located on the Potomac River. It's right across the river, literally, from West Virginia, as we'll see in a couple minutes. It's the largest city and metropolitan area of far western Maryland. This is the fun part of I-68 for me. What's known as the Cumberland Thruway. This section is very substandard as far as when we look at design standards for interstate highways. As you'll see in a moment, we're going to go down to a speed limit of 40 miles an hour. There are plenty of sharp curves and steep grades along this section of highway. And therefore it's perfect for designation on an interstate highway.
Yep, it was built before it started to be built in 1965, which is the same year as the Appalachian Regional Development Act. So it predated that a bit. And what's interesting is that they kind of knew it was going to be a problem. And it actually came up in planning documents in 1973, like, oh, well, we probably need to do something about this before the rest of the highway opens because it's substandard.
Here it is, though. It survived.
It's still here.
There's not much of a way that you could really get around the town. Anything you want to do, there's a mountain on the left, there's a mountain on the right, so it's just a question of how many times you want to cut through a mountain and who you're going to push out of the way to do it.
West Virginia knows a thing or two about that.
They do. I've come into Cumberland from the north, which is Maryland Route 807 off of 220. And the development starts pretty far up the valley there. Basically, every little valley has people living off of it. So to try to do something now means that you're displacing some number of people to do it. So what can you justify versus just having a low speed limit for a bit? And my understanding is that this is not a terribly accident-prone stretch of highway anymore, thanks to the measures they put in place. Although it's far from ideal, you lose some of the impetus to have to replace it in that regard.
Yeah, this is a pretty significant downgrade that we're on right now. And as we see, the speed limit has dropped to 55 and then 50, and now here's the first 40 sign. At the bottom of this hill, you'll get the dead man's curve effect as we make a sharp turn to the left to approach the city of Cumberland. As you head down this hill, over on your right is the Potomac River. On the right side of the river there is West Virginia. As we hit the bottom of the hill, this is. I hate to be a driver on this highway in the winter if there's a snowstorm. That must be fun. But here's downtown Cumberland on your left, and here's the elevated structure that takes us across town.
At some point, they are going to have to rebuild this, and looking towards maybe having some shoulders in place at that point. And it's going to be a few years before that, but the structures now are over 50 years old, so you're starting to have that discussion. And within the limits of not trying to bulldoze any more of town, what can you do? I would imagine part of the solution is getting rid of some of the many exits in downtown that are really not necessary for a town of 20,000 people, where it may have been for a town of 40,000 people. And one of the potential solutions, though I don't know if it will fly, is at Dead Man's Curve, going straight over the Potomac River and back into Maryland without ever crossing into West Virginia there, just going straight out in the river to take advantage of nobody living there and cut all that off. I imagine all options are on the table.
Including a urban boulevard with bike lanes.
I believe it.
I know someone who'd really love that.
I bet you do.
So do you.
Rainy,
I know
love
someone
it.
who would propose a tunnel instead.
I would be cool with the tunnel.
I'd be cool with that too. I'd be
Actually,
cool
I
with
think
love a
that's
tunnel.
the best option.
Yeah, I'd be cool.
And
with
so you have
tunnels
the high speed access through town, and then you have a way where people who want to get through town more slowly and have better access to places. Has the Acreage Boulevard with bike lanes. I think that's what they should be doing in Syracuse on I-81, but that's just me. You have the tunnel.
I just need to clarify that I was joking about the tunnel because the grades coming down the mountain on both sides really cannot get you into and out of the tunnel.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. As you said, because the hills are alive with the sound of not going to be able to build a tunnel.
Yeah, I was really
the
hoping
the Von Trapp family's going to sue me now. By the way,
I was really hoping for the big dig of Maryland here, but it sounds like that's not going to happen. Before I forget, I want to mention US 220 as we pass it right now. The 220 corridor heads north into Pennsylvania from here. It is officially part of ADHS Corridor O, which takes you up to Interstate 80 in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. The section of 220 between Cumberland, Maryland, and Bedford, Pennsylvania is also officially part of future I-99 corridor. However, well, Steve's reaction is also my reaction, which is, yeah, that ain't going to happen. But it is one of those things that's on the long-range proposals for this region. I would say that at this point, the two-lane road more than serves the purpose of the corridor adequately. But it's one of those things that they put on a map, so I have to mention it.
Now, as far as I know, Pennsylvania has officially canceled any plans to extend 99. So I think this is going to be all you get. Even if you widen it, you're not going to see an interstate.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I said, like, the two-lane road is adequate. I mean, I've driven it, and it seems just fine. So I'm not holding my breath for any kind of upgrade between Bedford and Cumberland. But so that's Corridor O in a nutshell. What else did we want to say about Cumberland before we move on? Anything good?
Well, I want to mention we just had a couple miles ago the first appearance of Maryland 144, which is a multi-section catch-all route of everything that is like old US 40 and the National Pike, going from there all the way east to Baltimore. So the main section of it is from Ellicott City into Baltimore City, and it's like more like a normal route there. But then out here, it does the weave back and forth with multiple sections the way that old Maryland routes do.
I'll jump in.
Yep.
So what's kind of interesting about how old US 40 was renumbered along the I-68 corridor is that it was given technically 4 different designations. That earlier we between exits 14 and 44 we had US 40 alt for the old National Pike, and then as Mike just said, we now have the first appearance of Maryland 144. That's going to continue until about exit 62, the Green Ridge State Forest. And then you're going to have US 40 Scenic And then later another appearance of Maryland 144 that also has a suffix in the Maryland system of WB. But and then there's even more old alignments that have numbers. There's a couple more little sub Maryland 144s. One over Town Creek east of Flintstone, and another just west of High Germany Road. Old alignments. And then there's also an old alignment with no number that goes over Sideling Hill. But yeah, it's kind of weird that they didn't just pick one designation and just run with it. That instead, it was that they threw all these different numbers in. It kind of frustrates me, to be honest. I wish they would have just done one. They would just pick one.
The 40 Scenic, I think, serves a bit different purpose than the others. That they actually want people potentially on that one as opposed to the others. But the 40 Alt certainly does not make sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually the only scenic U.S. highway in the country. There used to be one in Oklahoma, but that was, changed to just a regular alt route back about 10 years ago. But I personally wish it would just all be US 40 alt, but yeah, you're right. The US 40 scenic part is really cool because you get to actually go over Sideling Hill. And so, yeah, that is something that you might want to actually get people to come off of the highway to do. Whereas the others you would want to encourage more for local access.
In response to Bob's comment about Cumberland Farms in Cumberland, well, apparently there are Cumberland Farms in Cumberland, but just not Cumberland Farms, if you get my drift.
Yeah, well, Cumberland Farms is from Massachusetts. I think that's basically was the original name of the farm store, so they kept that. But the parent company, I don't even think they have stores in Maryland. It's EG Group.
I haven't seen one in Maryland.
They think they still have them in Delaware. I don't know if they go further south than that, but there's one literally right up the street from my aunt's house in Wilmington.
Yeah.
Cumberland is in the Sheets part of Maryland. I mean, it's definitely Sheets country in terms of convenience stores.
Yeah, see that? So they don't have Cumberland Farms in Cumberland, but they're full of Sheets instead.
Ba-doom.
Right.
I think one of these pieces of 68 that were either on or just were on or will be on in a few miles was the last stretch of the highway to be built in the late 80s and early 90s.
This is, and then the piece through Sideling Hill is, there was kind of an orphan or floating section of freeway ran through the state forest east of Flintstone, and we're passing the interchange for Flintstone. So if you were driving out here, you've got to break from the wretchedly bad US 40 for a few miles. I think it's a Bill Meyer Wild Management Area, I believe is the name of it. And so this is still a new I-68, but once we get past Flintstone, you can't really tell by driving on it now. It's not real obvious, but you will be on a much older part of freeway that was at one time just designated US 40 if you go back far enough in time.
I just want to close out. I want to close out real quick with the Cumberland Farms discussion. The one in Wilmington is the farthest south that they are. There's nothing else beyond that.
See that? My aunt's house is the last southern outpost of Cumberland Farms. All right, so if you're ever heading this far south, and you want to stop in for Cumbies, it's right up the street.
As for the last section that was built, so the last section was actually the remaining 19 miles between Cumberland and Piney Grove. So yeah, the section that we're on. The Sideling Hill section actually was the second to last section. And part of the reason behind that is because there was a lot of discussion about and controversy over which routing was going to be selected. So there were 4 different alternatives for the 19-mile section. The one that we have today pretty much is parallel to US 40 the whole way, but the one that MDOT, SHA, so the Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration, and FHWA selected in 1980, though, was not this one. They originally selected a southern bypass, which would have been 6 miles south and would have gone through Greenridge State Forest. So there was a lot of controversy for a lot of reasons. Well, A, it's nowhere near any of the existing towns. B, huge environmental concerns. And those were brought up by Patrick's favorites group, the Sierra Club.
Yes, that's true.
Oh, Patrick loves them.
Yeah.
Yes, he does. And but also that the southern bypass would have required twice as much land acquisition and been 36% more expensive. So 4 years later, they restudied it, and in 1986 decided to go with the fully parallel alignment. They did a couple tweaks to that alignment. They did a tweak near Flintstone and a tweak near Martin Mountain from what was originally proposed in the 1970s. But otherwise, they did what I think was the right thing by staying near the original path and National Road and near the towns and preserving what is a pretty awesome state forest for recreation.
We're about to enter that one little piece of kind of orphan freeway that was built there. I think actually it goes back to the 60s. Husband might correct me. He probably knows the exact date when that part of the freeway was constructed.
1967.
That sounds about right. And you can tell by this is still not that, because that bridge that's a very modern looking bridge, so it's not that. But we're getting to it here shortly.
But yeah, everything west of Cumberland, pretty much everything that was built first was everything west of Cumberland, with the exception of this section we're coming up on, as well as the 4-mile section that goes from I-70 in Hancock to Sideling Hill. That was built in 66.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And then, of course, the Cumberland Thruway.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, now that we're east of Cumberland, if you guys want to get into, like, the history of the Maryland section out this way. Yeah, I know the Sideling Hill deserves a discussion all to itself, but
Yep.
I don't know if there was anything else that you guys wanted to throw out there as far as history, development of this section of the highway.
I'll add one thing about development, and we touched on this on the Quarter Each discussion, but no less of an authority than the former head of Maryland State Highway said that the whole idea behind building this completing I-68 can be summed up in one phrase: induced demand, and that it was specifically designed to increase traffic heading into Western Maryland, and I guess also on to I-79 in Morgantown, West Virginia. And that was the big reason for it, was to improve access into Western Maryland communities, including in particular into to Garrett County, where Deep Creek Lake is located. And it's probably done that. I think Deep Creek Lake has gotten more popular than it once was, thanks to I-68 being there. So I know one person who had for years opposed highway projects in Maryland. He was at a technical conference that I was at, and this subject came up, and he flew up out of his chair like he was being launched by a rocket to object to what SHA, the head of SHA at the time, said about induced demand. And the person chairing the meeting told him to sit down and be quiet, because he was like this went bananas over that. So, but induced demand definitely had a big role in getting this, Corridor E completed from I-70 into Cumberland, because the rest of it was done in the 1970s, or most of the rest of it, I should say.
Yeah, that's exactly that's exactly why the I-68 was built, and it's really interesting because I looked into some studies to see what kind of impact overall they found with the ADHS. And it's really interesting because a 2010 study said that poverty was reduced by 4.2% in the Appalachian counties compared to border counties, and that poverty reduced 10% from the baseline from 1960 poverty rate, and that real per capita incomes grew 4% faster. What's interesting in an even more recent study is from 2019 is that that $34 billion of investment has been put in to ADHS from 1965 to 2015, and that without it, if we didn't have it, it would, they calculated that it would reduce the total income in the U.S. by $53.7 billion and $22 billion in Appalachia. And I found that really interesting, right? So spend $34 billion, to save $22 billion in Appalachia. It didn't work out as great for the people in Appalachia, but spend $34 billion to gain $53.7 billion in benefits for the country. And I think that's really interesting because that kind of fits with what I was thinking in our previous discussion in Corridor H of how putting the road through may not have as great of an impact on the communities that are there as it does for the people passing through.
I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't the case in a lot of these corridors in general, that for people like us or less roadly than us but still willing to get off the interstates, they're a great way to get through the back country, sightsee, stay at quaint hotels and whatever. But for the people living there, while it's convenient, what does it really do for them? You're not generating much development in the intervening areas. It's pretty much point to point. You get to a city that's already there, and the city's going to be better off, but not the people on the way there.
There's some truth to that. One thing that I've read, which is not any kind of formal academic study, but that the value of real property, especially in Garrett County, has gone up thanks to I-68. So the county government has become more prosperous, and absentee landowners who own a lot of the recreational land there, houses used for both summer and winter recreation, their properties have appreciated in value quite a lot. But I guess it directly benefits the people who live there in that their county government is more prosperous than it once was.
Yeah, I want to mention the purpose of the main purpose in the induced demand and proving this. The whole idea was to prove, yes, this was a really isolated part of Maryland before this was built. And if let's look at the old switchback at Sideling Hill, what was there to access the rest of the state, because everything, all the links were going north and south along the valleys, and tying them more into Pennsylvania and with West Virginia than Maryland itself. But the main reason I want to mention here is a lot's been talked about, like reducing poverty and the like. And like back in West Virginia, we had like roads to prosperity, which is kind of, I think it's something that's kind of disingenuous to make a promise based on something that's going to happen in the private sector. Like we're going to bring X company to our area and we're going to add like Y number of jobs. And that really, honestly, never really happens. But, overall, the overall is missed there is like public safety and response times, and particularly in these areas of the Appalachian counties, like this, like Allegheny County, which we're in here, is not as bad off as say some of the parts of West Virginia, but it's still has its fair share of opioid issues and the like, and it's still still Allegheny, I believe, has the lowest property value on average in Maryland of all the counties. But also is the hospitals are, I'm sure the hospitals are all stressed, and there's a lot of them probably in the threat of closing. But you need faster access times, and that could possibly save lives. And that's never really mentioned in these reports. It's always an economic thing, and we do better with that. So that's something the government is responsible for and can control. So it's that's important here. With even like Corridor H may seem a lot for what it's doing, but it's that's not the main part of it. It's just the ability to get from and to a place in a much faster, much faster time, and it can save lives in the end. So anyway, that's my. I'll step off the soapbox for the moment. Yeah, sure. Here you go.
So something I do want to add. So there is a statistic that I forgot to mention about employment actually going up in Garrett County from 1975 to 1991. And why can't I find the number now? But anyway, the here it is. So with the so Garrett County saw an increase of employment from 8,868 in 1976 to 15,334 in 1991. So it's almost double. And I think that, and Mike's right, it's hard to base this stuff off of statistics. And even what I said earlier was an overview of like the whole Appalachian system. So I think it's perfectly feasible to say that there are definitely parts of Garrett that are thriving, like Deep Creek Lake and where the government center is and in Oakland and everything. But that there's probably other parts that are not doing as great. Cumberland did not, exponentially explode in population or anything like that. And as Mike said, Allegheny is still one of the lowest, for income. So I think in some cases it's better, and in some cases it's not.
What do we want to say about Sideling Hill? Because there it is.
It was discussed as a tunnel, and I think ultimately it was felt that the operational costs of the tunnel were pretty high, and that's one of the reasons why they went with this massive cut here instead of a bored tunnel, I suppose. And I don't know if the tunnel alternative, something Laura might be able to enlighten us on. The tunnel alternative would have followed the same route as this huge cut, or would have been on a little bit different alignment if they built it as a bored tunnel.
Yeah, this is one of the more impressive rock cuts that you'll ever drive through. The video footage here will not be able to do it justice, but here it is as we pass through the Sideling Hill rock cut. I
encourage our viewers to stop there at the visitor center, which sometimes allows people to walk out, as you'll see.
Yeah.
Oh, my video's delayed, but it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's quite a sight to see. Yeah.
So beautiful.
Oh yeah.
I do want to throw out there though about the exhibit center that so there used to be a full-blown I'm getting their husband. There used to be a full-blown exhibit all about Sideling Hill there, and Governor O'Malley unfortunately closed it in 2009 with budget cuts, and so the exhibit got moved to Hancock, but Governor Hogan reopened the building in 2015 as a welcome center. So, but it's only the first floor that's being used right now.
Bastard. Vote him out.
I tried. He's term limited though, so he can't get reelected again. But anyway, no. So there was a legitimate concern about pulling it out of Hancock, and so there was so there have been studies done. The most recent in 2019 about how to transform the exhibit center and to create a new exhibit, because they don't want to take the exhibit back from Hancock, so they're looking at doing something new and exciting there. But yes, Patrick, you're right. The tunnel, they had 5 alternatives, 3 with the open cut, 2 with the tunnel. And anyway, the looking at the northernmost alignment for the cut and the tunnel actually would have been 1.5 miles shorter. The tunnel itself would have been like the whole section would have been 1.5 miles shorter. The tunnel itself would have been 1 3/4 miles. But cost, as Patrick mentioned, in 1973 dollars to do the cut was $24.2 million. To do a tunnel was almost double at $44.3 million. Yeah,
we mentioned this when we were talking about Corridor H, but if you talk about design standards and what engineers value when they're designing highways through picturesque areas like this, a European engineer would have put this in a tunnel, no question, and they wouldn't have even thought about it.
Absolutely.
But us in America, with our testosterone, we're like, oh, we're just gonna blow this mountain to kingdom come, and
ooh, dynamite.
Yeah.
The cheaper option wins when people have to pay taxes. In Europe, everyone's used to 80% taxes, and so you have enough money to do what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Taxed enough already, right? As some people would say.
Sticker shock when it comes to time.
Yeah. Although I will say that there was one logistical reason why they chose why the open cut was more appealing, and that was hazmat issues, and that there was concern that if they, that provided that the price was, was more reasonable, because I think the price is what won at the end of the day. But if they were to do a tunnel, there would have been a concern of trucks, having hazmats still going over Sideling Hill, which they did not want to happen.
Yeah. Well, I think we've seen a sign on the right that says that I-68 is ending soon. We mentioned that 68 is more or less a bypass of a segment of I-70. What would have happened if we had followed I-70 instead? We would have been very poor because we would have followed the Pennsylvania Turnpike, but we also would have had to go through. We also would have
been very claustrophobic.
Well, we also would have had to go through a town called Breezewood, which, as the sign on the left tells you, is the control city for I-70 westbound.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a good spot that you want to be caught in either. And also, it should be mentioned that the section of I-70 in Pennsylvania from here on up to Breezewood is posted at 55 miles an hour for a speed limit. And yes, the Pennsylvania Highway Patrol does enforce that.
They absolutely do, especially on the eastbound side.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
so,
we're at the terminal interchange of I-68 already after 113 miles. You guys, congratulations! You have clinched a mainline interstate tonight. So,
and another thing about I-70 is, once you get on, basically west of the Pennsylvania Turnpike through, basically from New Stanton to Washington, the lanes are very narrow. In parts.
Lanes are narrow. The interchanges are substandard, and a lot of fatal crashes there.
Yeah, so I-68 might actually be a safer way to go.
Unless you're at, and I know we've talked about the substandard and the hills still on the Pennsylvania side, but I think that's still a little more favorable for loaded trucks than 68 is.
I agree with that. I've talked to truck drivers as part of my job, and they're not, a lot of them, especially ones that are hauling near 80,000-pound loads, are not especially fans of I-68 because they feel that the grades, there's a lot more pretty steep grades on I-68 than there are on the Pennsylvania Turnpike between Breezewood and New Stanton. However, part of I-70 between Breezewood and the Maryland border crosses also Sideling Hill, but it does so. There's no cut there. It's up pretty steep, and then it's down pretty steep. And on the downside is where you often will see the Pennsylvania State Police strictly enforcing that 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. And so that, but I think you're right, Steve. If you compare the turnpike section of I-70 to I-68, you do get less in the way of steep grades on the turnpike than you do on 68.
I don't really. We've reached the end of our presentation obligation tonight. Of course, we drove the entire length of I-68, but I do have some bonus footage from the Cumberland area that I'd like to show with you guys. Before
Yay!
Roads!
So when we did our drive, we drove 68 eastward across Cumberland. I'll show you what it looks like on the westbound side, just so you have that in your head. Yeah, we drove the roller coaster through Cumberland with the grades and the elevated highway, and so this video will show you what it looks like going in the other direction.
I'll add on a personal note, there's a fast food place that's almost under I-68. It has a Western theme, Roy Rogers, and I once stopped at Roy Rogers to get a trigger burger, and I ran into a fellow road geek totally by random there who I won't repeat his name here because I don't see him here to defend himself, but totally random ran into him. He was driving all the way back from somewhere in the upper Midwest, might have been up in the Dakotas somewhere, and so it just so happened that he was headed back to Arlington, Virginia, and I was stopping there and probably heading back to the Maryland suburbs of D.C. myself, and so we talked for a little while there at this Roy Rogers here in downtown Cumberland.
So this person was not headed for Eastern Kentucky.
No, this person was not headed for Eastern Kentucky, although this person has visited every county in the United States, including the quote difficult ones in Alaska and Hawaii.
Oh, okay. Now I know who it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's quite random that you would run into that person at that location.
Yes.
Yeah. So there used to be Roy Rogers on Long Island where I grew up. In the town I grew up in, there used to be 2 Roy Rogers locations. One is now an IHOP, and the other one is now a Jewish funeral home.
Oh boy. Oy
vey is what you meant.
Yeah. And then there was another funeral home that was down the street, which is now a day spa.
What the hell is going on around here?
Now you can see it's not.
I don't know. Smithtown's a weird place.
If you were to look to your left here, you would actually be almost. You would see West Virginia, the Potomac River in West Virginia, are right off to your left here. Ridgely, West Virginia, would be right here to the left. And that 40 speed limit, by the way, at times is strictly enforced by the Cumberland Municipal Police in addition to the Maryland State Police. So it's not a bad idea to reasonably comply with that speed limit through here.
I've found that you generally get around a 10 to 15 tolerance, especially if traffic is flowing well. You don't want to be weaving in and out of cars.
There's a spot as the road starts to trend up here where they often will sit on the right looking for speeders, which, of course, even if the municipal cops in Maryland, even if they write you a speeding ticket, they don't get any of the money because it all goes to the state. And I think that's by design, so you don't have any Hopewell, Virginia style speed traps for what it's worth.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing. That's interesting. So I realize my video is a little delayed, but so you may already be here. But we're approaching, the exit for Vach Road. That's unsigned Maryland 658. And I just wanted to point out something really interesting is that there are a lot of unsigned routes at these exits. And what's interesting is how many of them are versions of Maryland 948 with a suffix. So, to nod to the original US 48, but then with a 9 in front. So thought that was, an interesting tidbit.
There's an abnormally high amount of blue sky in this video.
It's gorgeous.
Guys.
Considering what we've seen to this point.
When were you heading westbound as opposed to eastbound?
Same weekend.
Oh, okay.
I think maybe 2 to 3 days apart. The section east of Cumberland was refilmed in June 2020. But everything from Morgantown to Cumberland was filmed in May 2018. And this westbound video was 2 or 3 days previous.
Yeah, just in time to get the Negro Mountain signs, as I mentioned earlier. But also something else that you might have seen in the video, and I saw one as we were talking about Negro Mountain, is a Maryland wildlife sign. So it's got a cool thing on I-68 are these brown signs that, talk about, kind of cautioning about there being wildlife. But it's cute because it's got little cutouts with different little animals on it. You don't see those signs anywhere else.
How old school do you want to get? Because there's an even older version of it years ago, and on top of mileposts they had little, looks sort of like a stork in a circle with a number. So, or cranes, or apparently those were blue herons.
Thank you.
And this was part of the discontinued Maryland Mountain game, where kids were supposed to spot these numbers as the parents drove across the state.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I have
I
a very amusing, to myself at least, take on this thing, which is you're trying to make kids spot tiny numbers on top of mileposts as you drive, and where you can't really tell what it is, or you can't really see the number at speed. And, that'll keep kids occupied for a few hours staring at mileposts in the hope that there's something they can almost see. And I said Maryland Welcome Centers carry these booklets, and I'm sure interested parents gobbled them up by the ones and twos.
Yeah.
So you can tell why they replaced those with the wildlife signs, which are a little more visible.
Yeah. So I wanted to point out, when we were watching the westbound section, the last exit that we were passing was for Laval, and Laval actually has an old toll house that was used for the National Road. It's right on alternate 40 there, basically a little west of the exit from I-68. So if you're interested in road history, that's a place where you can, see an old building that was used for the National Road.
Yay!
At the exit, one of the exits for Frostburg, there's also a Noah's Ark that's been under construction for probably since before I-68 was designated I-68, and you can see that clearly from the freeway as you pass. If you're going west, it's on your right, and I don't know if their plans are to finish it anytime soon, or if they have an estimated date of apocalypse when the ark is going to be needed. And I think it's all built out of steel, so it's kind of heavy. And I don't know, I'm not sure what they're planning to clad that steel framing in. And I have no idea whether a competent structural engineer has reviewed that to make sure that it will actually, take up, be able to float in an ocean, which kind of high. But I guess if you got enough biblical type rain, who knows, maybe the thing might float at some point. But anyway, if you're out that way, that's something else to see now.
I am pretty sure that Noah was a licensed professional engineer, so I
think
you should just go with whatever drawing that he drew up.
In which state?
He was probably the first PE.
He might have been.
Was he a marine architect? Because that's what you're probably supposed to be when you're designing things to go into the ocean.
Yeah. I wonder if it's related to the Noah's Ark that was built in Kentucky.
Good question.
Was it built by our friend in Kentucky?
No, it was not.
Oh.
He's not a PE for one thing.
Well, I can tell that already. I can tell by his ramblings on social media that he's not, but Anyway,
Well,
welcome to
so-
Cumberland, everybody.
Cumberland, yes.
Yay!
Hey, there's the sheets.
There's the sheets. Hey!
Made to order. Made to order.
You
Made to order.
have a sheets there, and you have a Roy Rogers there, and
Rudder's better.
well, Roy Rogers certainly. I certainly like getting a Roy Rogers Trigger Burger in honor of his late horse Trigger, and the joke was, of course, that the Roy Rogers burgers were made in part from Trigger, but I don't know that was ever independently verified or not.
No, they used other horses because that would be ridiculous. Trigger's too old.
Okay, all right, that's reasonable.
Yeah.
And they probably used more than one horse too.
Yeah,
Wouldn't be surprised.
Probably.
they sold enough volume. They probably had to deal with a horse farm.
Well, now I'm gonna have to go to Roy Rogers and have a Trigger Burger in honor of our friend from Arlington, Virginia.
Yeah, you did do that.
Future road meat
Yeah.
restaurant. The
I
Cumberland,
consider him more of an
Rogers.
acquaintance.
Yeah, that's the impromptu Cumberland road meet.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
See, it's a little different from when you just happen to have dinner with a fellow road enthusiast, like I have in years past in other parts of the country.
I've had dinner with road enthusiasts in Cumberland before. I took a picture of a shelfie.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
Yes.
We all. Yes, I remember that.
Was
But
it the
that's-
Pawpaw Tunnel before that?
Yes,
Pawpaw Tunnel.
that's
Yeah.
right. Another Road Geek's child was a baby, and that Road Geek's child, I think, now is in school or
Yeah.
close to being in school.
And I remember splitting off basically from everyone in Cumberland. I actually stayed in Clary'sville that night, and right across the street from the dingy hotel I wound up finding a room in, there was an old alignment of 40. It might have also been an old alignment of the National Road in Clary'sville.
Awesome.
Alternate 40 meets Maryland 55. There is an old national road that's next to it. I do have some pictures of that on my hard drive. So
People in chat are asking when the next Cumberland road meet is.
Next week.
Oh,
be there or
I'd
square.
be open to hosting one this summer.
That Cumberland meet, it sounds fun.
Yeah.
I'm basically giving you the tour right now, but you know.
One thing, if we were to do Cumberland, that I certainly recommend. It's a little ways away down State Route 51, but is to go to the Old Town one-lane low-water toll bridge. That's a fun place to visit. And some of us have been there, and actually somebody said, "Well, there can't be a toll bridge there." Unfortunately, I had an image, and I sent it to them, showing the cup coming out of the toll booth, no easy pass, and you put your money in the cup, and you are allowed to cross the toll bridge.
Rainey announced it. She's hosting her first road meet this summer
cool.
with my help.
Yay!
Hey.
She'll be setting the record for the youngest ever meet host.
Yeah, you'll have to teach her how to say "Yay!"
Does this mean that she's paying the restaurant bill and we have to pay her back?
Oh no!
She'll pay and play money.
Oh boy.
Oh, okay.
Take
She's
it.
playing Canadian Tire money.
Hey, there you go.
You could do that too.
It's good for everything except tires.
Yeah. I remember one time I went to Canadian Tire and they were selling wild blueberries.
Nice.
I'm like, what? Like wild blueberries now for sale at Canadian Tire. They also had at one time they used to have a wedding registry at Canadian Tire. They had this cardboard cutout of a bride and groom holding kitchen appliances.
Oh, nice.
Like the bride was holding a toaster, and the groom was holding a microwave.
Oh, cool.
And yes, I have a picture of that floating around somewhere.
Okay. Yeah.
Really want to thank everybody who has been listening to us carry on for the last couple hours. We've certainly enjoyed bringing this presentation to you guys. Guys, you have any closing thoughts before we start to wrap things up?
Thank you, and it was fun. It was great to get together with everybody, even through this cyber venue.
Yeah, it is good catching up with everyone, both the other people who are participating tonight and the people in the chat. I say the other thing is be on the lookout for more updates for Gribble Nation, both on the blog gribblnation.org and the podcast Anchor FM /Gribble Nation, and of course our Facebook and Instagram pages.
Yes, and I want to throw in there that with all of my amazing notes that I've written for this presentation, I'm going to make a long overdue update to the MD Roads website.
Yay!
Yay!
That's way better than my crappy Alps roads. I'm looking forward to yours.
Here's a good example, Exit 43D, of why this is not an interstate highway.
Yeah, I'd rather read Laura's update than read yours, Steve.
I think we all agree with that.
I'd rather read your updates than read my update.
Oh, y'all are so nice.
I was referring to everyone's updates.
Yeah. Well.
If you look straight
I want to read all the updates too.
You look straight ahead, you'll see double stack containers. That's a very new innovation for CSX through Western Maryland. There were several low clearance tunnels that prevented double stack, and they were getting their clocks cleaned by trains that would either go through Pennsylvania on the Norfolk Southern on the former Pennsylvania Railroad main line, or actually the former C&O, now also CSX West out of Hampton Roads, Virginia. And so Maryland actually coughed up some money to help raise the clearances to allow double stacks to use the B&O mail line, now also CSX, to get to Cumberland and then through the Sand Patch Tunnel in Pennsylvania and on out towards Pittsburgh and so forth. So little railroad trivia there for you.
Yeah, so my thanks to Steve of AlpsRoads.net, of Doug of Gribble Nation, of Laura and Mike of MD Roads, and Pat of the Everybody Loves the Sierra Club. My thanks to all of them who came on tonight and helped paint the picture of Interstate 68 for all of you. It was a lot of fun to do this. So that's gonna do it for another. That's gonna do it for another episode here. So
all right, thank you.
Play the theme music.
Yeah, so to address a couple of questions in the chat here real quick before I sign off, the Subaru is great. I love it. It's awesome. Yeah, that's gonna do it. So if nobody's got any last minute things they want to address, I think I'm gonna end this presentation here.
Thank you all.
Yeah, so it was great to
thank you all so much.
Yep.
Yeah, it was great. It was great having you guys. It was great hearing from you. Looking forward to seeing you all again real soon, in person, of course, but also on our next presentation. And and from all of us here, I'd like to say thank you all very much for watching.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.